There are moments in relationships when silence speaks louder than any confession, and words meant to sound innocent carry the weight of something unspoken. You can hear it in her tone, see it in her body language, a hesitation, a distance, a small shift in how she describes her world. When a woman becomes unfaithful, she doesn't always hide behind lies. Often, she hides behind truths she can no longer feel. She will say things that sound ordinary: "I just need some space, I'm not happy lately," or "you wouldn't understand." But beneath those words lies a story of longing, disconnection, and identity quietly unraveling. Infidelity often begins long before a physical act ever occurs. It starts in the subtle erosion of emotional intimacy, in the quiet spaces between two people where connection once lived but now feels strained or distant. When a woman becomes emotionally unfaithful, it doesn't happen suddenly. It unfolds slowly, almost invisibly, through small moments of neglect, unmet needs, and unspoken frustrations. These moments accumulate over time, creating an emotional vacuum that she begins to fill elsewhere, not necessarily with another person at first, but with fantasies, conversations, or thoughts that awaken something she's been missing. In this space, infidelity isn't about desire in its pure form, it's about disconnection, about seeking a reflection of oneself that feels lost within the relationship. Before the act of betrayal ever takes place, the mind begins to wander. She might start noticing what she no longer feels, rather than what she does. She begins to observe the distance between how things are and how they used to be, or how she wishes they were. The small talk at dinner feels hollow. The shared laughter feels forced. She starts to feel unseen, unappreciated, or emotionally alone, even while physically present in the same room. This emotional absence is what gives birth to the first act of unfaithfulness, not in behavior, but in thought. She might begin to daydream about being understood, admired, or desired again. Those fantasies aren't necessarily about a specific person, they are about rediscovering a part of herself that has gone dormant. Infidelity, then, becomes an expression of emotional hunger. It is the search for aliveness, for connection that feels authentic and stimulating. It's about someone yearning to feel something that reminds her she is still capable of passion, curiosity, and joy. These emotions don't appear out of nowhere, they surface because something essential within her has been left unattended. And as those needs go unmet, she begins to drift, first emotionally, then mentally, and finally, sometimes, physically. When this detachment begins, the signs are subtle. She might appear distracted, less present, or more guarded. Her words may seem neutral, but her energy changes. The relationship becomes a routine rather than a source of renewal. The disconnection grows, and with it, the temptation to find connection elsewhere grows too. Infidelity is often less about a deliberate act of betrayal and more about the slow disappearance of emotional closeness that once held two people together. It starts in conversation, in neglect, in those moments when two people stop truly seeing each other and start merely coexisting, unaware that emotional distance is quietly paving the way for physical separation. The language of an unfaithful woman often reveals more about her inner conflict than any deliberate act of deceit. Words are never just words, they are mirrors of the emotional landscapes within us. When a woman speaks while carrying the weight of unfaithfulness, her tone, phrasing, and timing often express what her conscience is trying to conceal. She may not intend to lie, yet her sentences become veiled reflections of guilt, confusion, or longing. Her language transforms subtly, sometimes tender, sometimes distant, but always laced with contradiction. It is in those contradictions that her truth quietly resides. She might speak of independence, yet sound emotionally detached. She might emphasize honesty, yet avoid eye contact when speaking. The things she says, and the way she says them, begin to form a pattern that reveals the dissonance between her inner world and her outer actions. In her conversations, small cues betray what she cannot consciously admit. She may say, "I just need to figure things out," which sounds practical, but underneath it lies a deeper emotional turbulence. Her need to figure things out often masks a struggle between loyalty and longing, between the comfort of stability and the excitement of something new. Her words are not manipulative, they are protective. She uses language to manage her guilt, to rationalize her feelings, and to maintain a sense of control over a situation that is beginning to control her. Each phrase becomes a defense mechanism, a way to avoid the full confrontation with her desires and the consequences they may bring. The unconscious expressions of infidelity are rarely about betrayal alone. They are about an internal split, the part of her that still values the relationship and the part that yearns to feel alive again. This tension manifests linguistically. She might say she's fine, but her silence afterward betrays her discomfort. She might say, nothing's wrong, yet her eyes search for understanding that her words cannot deliver. These verbal inconsistencies are the body's way of communicating what the mouth cannot confess. Language, after all, is an emotional map, and even when we try to disguise it, our true coordinates remain visible to those who listen closely. The most revealing aspect of her speech is not necessarily what she says, but how she says it. Her voice may soften when she speaks of another person, or she might become defensive when discussing her partner. She could appear indifferent to conversations that once mattered deeply. Every word, pause, and inflection carries an emotional code that exposes her psychological reality. Her speech becomes both confession and concealment, a delicate dance between truth and pretense, desire and duty. Through her language, one can sense not only her unfaithfulness but also her profound emotional unrest, the conflict between her longing for connection and her fear of being truly seen. The phrase "an unfaithful woman" repeats unconsciously is rarely a deliberate lie. It is a reflection of her inner turmoil, an attempt to make sense of emotions she herself does not fully understand. When she says things like "it's not you, it's me," or "I just need to feel something again," she isn't fabricating excuses to ease her partner's pain, she is revealing the truth of her own disconnection. These phrases are not manipulations but emotional signals, fragments of honesty cloaked in confusion. They arise from the tension between guilt and desire, between loyalty to her partner and loyalty to her own unmet needs. Her words are often misunderstood because they sound defensive or dismissive, but in reality, they are confessions of emotional emptiness and longing for something that feels real again. When a woman reaches the point where she repeats such phrases, it shows that she has already begun an internal conversation about her unhappiness. Her mind is trying to justify what her heart can no longer silence. "It's not you, it's me" becomes a coded way of saying, "I no longer recognize myself here. I just need space" translates to "I feel suffocated by expectations I no longer align with." These are not attempts to manipulate but efforts to articulate a discomfort that words can barely contain. She is not always aware of the deeper meaning behind her own statements. To her, they may sound like simple explanations, yet, beneath them lies a profound emotional revelation that her act of infidelity is less about escaping her partner and more about escaping a version of herself that feels confined or unseen. In these moments, language becomes a mirror reflecting her emotional fragmentation. Every repeated phrase is a way to bridge the distance between her internal truth and her external reality. She may not even notice how often she says it because repetition offers comfort. Saying the same thing over and over allows her to maintain control in a situation defined by chaos. It gives her a narrative she can hold on to, one that justifies her actions and soothes her guilt. Through these words, she tries to reconcile two conflicting parts of herself, the one that still values the relationship and the one that craves freedom and rediscovery. Her unconscious repetition is an emotional echo, a signal of the human struggle to understand one's own desires. She doesn't realize that what she's saying is not merely a justification but a revelation, a plea to be understood, not as a betrayer, but as someone trying to reconnect with her own sense of vitality. Her words carry the duality of confession and confusion, reflecting the timeless human paradox between comfort and curiosity, stability and passion, belonging and individuality. Understanding what an unfaithful woman says and what she truly means opens a profound window into the psychology of desire, guilt, and unmet needs. Every word she speaks during this phase carries two layers of meaning, the one that is audible and the one that is emotional. She might use calm and rational words to maintain balance, yet beneath them exists a storm of conflicting emotions. When she says she feels different, or that she needs to focus on herself, she is not simply making a statement, she is unconsciously revealing her emotional displacement. Her words become both a defense and a doorway. To those who listen without judgment, these statements expose a deeper human struggle, the need to be seen, to be desired, and to feel alive again after a long period of emotional numbness. Desire is rarely simple. It often emerges from spaces where something has been lost: attention, excitement, curiosity, or the feeling of being chosen. When a woman begins to speak from that place, her language transforms. It no longer communicates only facts, it communicates longing. The way she phrases her sentences, the pauses she takes, the subtle tension in her tone all reveal that her heart is caught between fulfillment and emptiness. Guilt also finds its voice in these conversations. She may sound defensive or distant not because she lacks remorse, but because her guilt is overwhelming. She cannot yet name it, so it hides within her language. The more she tries to explain her feelings, the more tangled her words become, because she is trying to translate a feeling that logic cannot contain. These unspoken truths live in the space between words. Sometimes she speaks not to deceive but to protect herself, her partner, or the fragile sense of identity she is trying to rebuild. Her need for understanding is rarely about justification, it is about being recognized in her complexity. The act of infidelity itself is often a symptom, not the cause. It exposes a deeper emotional disconnection that has long existed beneath the surface. Her words, if listened to closely, reveal a story about absence, an absence of emotional resonance, intimacy, or personal meaning. Through her speech, she offers clues to her inner world, but they require emotional literacy to decode. When she speaks of needing space, excitement, or self-discovery, she is rarely asking for distance from her partner, she is asking for reconnect with her own essence. She may not even realize that what she is expressing is not rebellion, but a yearning for wholeness. The psychology behind her words is an intricate dance between guilt for betraying another and desperation to reclaim something lost within herself. To understand her language is to understand that infidelity is not simply about moral failure, but about the human attempt to bridge the gap between who we are and who we long to be. Infidelity is less about betrayal and more about the human hunger for vitality and being seen. When a woman becomes unfaithful, it is rarely just a rebellion against her partner, it is often a rebellion against the dullness that has crept into her life. Over time, routine, predictability, and unspoken disappointments begin to numb the emotional connection that once felt electric. The woman who once felt desired, alive, and full of color begins to fade into the background of her own existence. In this quiet fading, infidelity becomes a search for resurrection, a desperate attempt to feel alive again, to feel noticed, to reclaim the spark that reminds her she still exists beyond the roles she plays. It is not always a rejection of love but a plea for recognition. Every person needs to feel seen, not just looked at, but truly seen for their essence, their energy, their complexity. When that visibility disappears, so does a sense of aliveness. An unfaithful woman often seeks that lost recognition through someone who reflects back the parts of her that have been forgotten. She is not necessarily looking for another man, she is looking for another version of herself. The new connection becomes a mirror that shows her vitality, confidence, and femininity, qualities she fears have been lost within the familiarity of her current relationship. Infidelity, then, becomes less about lust and more about rediscovery. It is an unconscious way of saying, I want to feel something again, or I need to remember who I am. Betrayal in this context is not purely an act against another person, but against the monotony that has drained her emotional life. The guilt she feels afterward often comes not only from hurting her partner but from realizing that she crossed a boundary in her pursuit of being seen. Yet that guilt coexists with a strange sense of relief, because for a brief moment, she felt alive again. The affair becomes a paradox, both an awakening and a wound. Through it, she confronts her own contradictions, the desire to be loyal and the craving to be free, the need for safety and the hunger for risk. At its core, infidelity exposes the universal human desire for vitality. It reminds us that people don't cheat because they stop loving, they cheat because they stop feeling alive in the love they have. For the unfaithful woman, the act is not merely about seeking pleasure. It is about reclaiming energy, excitement, and the affirmation that she still matters, that she still evokes emotion, that she still exists in a world that has slowly turned gray. Beneath the betrayal lies a yearning not for another person, but for a deeper connection to herself and the life that once made her feel fully awake.